Hey guys, here we are working on it, trying to get it built. We have the 2015 5th Gen Camaro SS Brembo brakes on a Pontiac Solstice chassis with a 1986 Mark II Supra body on top that we're mid-wide body conversion on. I got these brakes pretty much for free off of a total burned down car, and I wanted to see how long they'd work, and they worked really well. It stops better than my pickup, it stops better than my Saturn Sky, it stops just about as well as the average C6, which I think is great. It's a 2,100 pound car, 14-inch rotors, 4-piston calipers, but it's more about the diameters of the pistons than it is about how many pistons when you look up hydraulic application pressure. More on that later. I'm going to run a whole physics lesson for you guys, how some 4-piston brakes will perform better than a 6-piston brake, but not these. These aren't going to outshine many things, but they're factory Camaro brakes that I sprayed primer and 2K paint on, and they have survived many high temp stops, and I threw a decal on before I clear coated. But today our challenge is, I ordered new brakes. They'll be here in 2 weeks, but I want to be able to drive the car. The indicator tabs were scratching, so I bent them. Yeah, I know, radical, right? I know to buy the brakes. That's why they're there. They say fix your brakes. The brakes are now on the way to be repaired, and we don't have to worry about that. Two things that I know everyone's going to comment on right now. I can already tell. That is not a fake intercooler. That's a real intercooler. It's rated to 650. It's rated to 3 bar. It's a good intercooler. It's just not hooked up. It was for the 1JZ. We pulled it out. We're mocking up enough plumbing before we put the 1JZ in, because one thing a lot of people do is they throw the motor in after, and they're like, oh my god, I gotta do the plumbing. Well, guess what, guys? You know where it's going. Before you put the engine in, here, we were speaking to each other. Before you put your engine in, plumb it. Is it hard to figure out where your intercooler and your intake's going to go before everything goes in? Don't lock it in and just sit there for 6 months and be like, oh, I spent 17 grand on my motor, but I didn't spend any money or thought process on where we're going to run our piping. Well, you got those 18 months or however long it took your ARP head studs to arrive mid-COVID to plan where you're going to run your intercooler lines. So that's what we're doing right now. When you have a moment, you do everything you can. You don't wait for the motor to come in and then do other shit. No, you start building your wire harness, you build all the plugs, you build the pigtails, you grab every little bit you think you're going to need. And it's not just injectors. Make sure you got your hat spacers. Make sure you know your injection angles, the degree, the fan. Make sure you know your idle on those injectors. Don't buy injectors on eBay if you can't look up your dwell times and stuff like that. If you can't look up how many milliseconds and your delays, and you don't want some injector that you have no background on. So while you have all this time, do your research, Google up all that stuff. But the next thing you guys are going to talk shit about is wheel spacers. You guys know why I have that? Well, one of my great friends, Julian, donated to the project some inky wheels and tires. These tires are incredibly amazing. I can't get them to slap. They are literally consistent. Day 1, day 2, you can get them hot, get them cold, and as long as you run them at operating temp, they run consistent. They're not gonna like randomly snap on you. They tell you when they're going. You're gonna hear it. But back onto this. You can't fit those wheels and those tires on 14-inch rotors with a 4-piston caliper without a spacer. Now I know what you're saying. Oh my gosh, Logan, if you're running high horsepower, you don't want to trust a wheel spacer. You're right. I don't trust much on this car. I don't trust myself on this car to go full speed. That's why I don't. That's the answer. Until I completely do trust it, I'm not going to go batshit. That's the answer. Don't go crazy on your car. Don't drive it that hard. But you're going to drive it kind of hard. Have fun. But there's no point in me going 200 miles an hour in a car with 64 horsepower. I'm not worried about that. This is not the problem in a car with 64 horsepower or whatever, 70. whatever it has. I have no idea. It's a GM Ecotech 2.4. It's getting swapped back in with a 1JZ. So if that GM Ecotech can drive the car so hard that these wheel spacers on 5/8 lug nuts pushes them too hard, I'm pushing lateral G's over 2. And this car can't push a 1, much less a 0.9 today. These cars might be a 0.85 car with these tires, which, if you guys know, 5 car is really fun. A 1.0 car is like the goal. It's like a Porsche 911 GT3 RS. The 1.0 skid is exciting. It wakes you up. It's Earth's gravity in the opposite direction of Earth, and it feels great. If you continue in a straight path, it means liftoff. So when you feel a car that can drive sideways with equal gravity that Earth provides on a 1G skid pad, you literally feel like you're about to launch. It is a amazing feeling. Drive an old M3. You know, you guys spend 15 grand on a car and you literally get to experience 1G on the skiddy. Doubt it, just fucking throw good rubber on there, hit it with a torch and a compound, and you guys are going to scare the crap out of yourself. So there's more to physics and enjoying your car than going fast in a straight line. And this car has taught us a lot of these principles. Our weight balance is 50-50 at 2,100 pounds. We're about to change out the coilover and leaf springs, and we're going to corner balance because that's another issue. But we're going to have to get the springs and suspension before we do the wide body and finish any further, because it's based on those corner to corner weight distributions. We need to build the car like it drives great first and build the body around a car that drives great. We've tried to 3D print everything we can on this project. So part of that is using a donated 3D printer. Thank you, TJ Abshire, for the donation. You and me have been driving cars together since we were 4 with Hot Wheels. And thanks to you, this front bumper cover is printed. It's probably barely on there. I shouldn't touch it. 3D printed these headlights using that printer. These were inspired by the Hyundai Envision. That car changed my look on retro, and it reminded me that that era of cars isn't worthless. It has something. You see the E-Legend? I feel like that Audi E-Legend has a place here because the taillights are going to end up in this project. Here's the headlight preprint, and here's where they're at. I feel like we should cover how they look real fast. In case you guys haven't seen, this was a 200-hour project to make these headlights, program them, or whatever, not program them, just find the right hardware application and get this looking and working like I think that the Envision would have been done, and had it been done, you know, like this, in Toyota style. So Toyota lights typically have 2. In the Toyota era, the oldies had 2 headlights and an amber below. So we're going to replicate that. Also inspired by that was this bumper cover on the Audi E-Legend. And then, as you see here, it's a sill. And you see here it's a feature. We're going to switch it to a feature. It's going to end up with a cowl around it. And I think by incorporating that, we're going to end up with a really unique look. And you see how these are white? We're going to do them amber for Toyota because that's how they do it. Got to have ambers right there. Sorry, guys. It's what we do. It's a Toyota thing. It's a Toyota body. We are keeping it 100% true on the body lines. We didn't lose anything on the wide body. It is guaranteed Toyota Celica on those body lines. There's no new lines added. Now, because we're going with a Group 5 influence and inspired body, we are going to drop that out 6 inches. We are going to pop this bad boy out 6 inches. And this thing is going to be awkward. It's going to just look silly. That's the goal. These cars were told that they couldn't move the doors, and the race rules thought that meant that they weren't going to do much with the car. Well, they ended up making the cars a foot wider just to race them, and they took a foot off of the bumpers for safety reasons so they could turn tighter. They took a lot that they could, and they put it on the taillight or the spoiler, and they added a lot of aero on the rear. So if you look up Group 5, guys, you'll see they did a lot of rear spoiler work, and I think on the Toyota Supra, the rear is going to get most of the love right here. And I haven't even began to get into it, but when you see the back of a Mark IV, you know what it is. And I think we're going to find a way to incorporate, when you see the back of this, you're still going to know it's a Supra. It's a classic, but we got to figure out how to do it. Now, we only got 2 of the lights in, but old Supras had 1 and 2, 3 and 4, and when you hit the brakes, they light up extra bright, along with the third brake light, which we don't have wired yet. We don't have license plate lights either. Obviously, I need to go that rolled out. I didn't see nothing, officer. But the goal is pretty transparent here. We're going for a very vintage, semi Back to the Future Supra that reminds people that the 80s were a really fun era. And if the car becomes undrivable, then we did it wrong. We focus on building the car, like I said, corner balanced. We're upgrading the brakes, the suspension, the coilovers. We're focusing on the driver experience, the driver's view. We're doing as much as we can to bring out the fact that cars are for driving. If your car has low miles and is fun to drive, I am a fun person. If you have a fun car and it's fun to drive and has low miles, you don't get invited to a lot of parties. Sorry. It's the guy who drives his car and brings it to the party and it's fun to be there. So build a car you feel is going to be fun. Don't make it so radical. And I've done this. I've regretted it with my 454 stroker project. You don't want to drive it because it just gets 2 miles per gallon and it takes 15 minutes to warm up and it's hard to start and every once in a while it needs a jump. And every 10th moon you have to speak a curse to it and then it works. No. Hey guys, build a car you love to drive. When you look at it, you're like, hey, it's going to start up. I built it well enough. I checked the connections. I checked resistance. And I trust this car to drive every time. I test drove the shit out of it. I went under the car every time. I looked for signs of wear. I looked for signs of leak. I looked for electrical abrasions and get ahead of the problems. And then when you see what they look like, when you see scratched coating on your wire or even a brake line rubbing against the chassis, and you just see anything touching, don't let anything touch. If you learn to build a car where nothing touches, and every line, electrical connection is isolated on a standoff, things don't abrase, the engine rotates. And on a car like this right now with loose and rubber polyurethanes, we got like 6 inches of rotational variation. So when you look at the starter wire, you better expect to have some 3 inches of slack north and south, so where it can rotate a little. And when you look at the systems from the factory and OEM, they design that way. But if we don't design within the secondary electrical system, because we had to rewire everything on this car, guys. This car had, I disconnected the ECU, had to cut and extend one harness. It was about 30 or 40 wires. And we did the whole EcoTech 2.4 relocation. So that was about 1.5 feet lower. And we had a lot of wires that weren't wired this way. So when you have an engine that I think was from an HHR, it was a front wheel drive engine. That's all I know. And you have to put on this harness. We had other challenges too. If you look at the cooling, we don't even know where this goes. This is supposed to, on my other engine, we have a whole unit here to bleed off the motor. We don't get to do that here. Luckily, it doesn't overheat and it runs like a champ. But titanium, I think it was that TA6 heat shroud. We found the titanium heat shroud actually protects the power steering reservoir pretty well, unless we sit in traffic, which we don't. This car is for night driving right now. We go to Cars and Coffee, then we drive around at night and just slow roll the old Pixel Boy. But doing the wires here, we ended up having to check resistances on everything after we extended it, and making sure that all the additions we did for the headlights and the other signals didn't change the resistance on the system so that it didn't think that a headlight was out, required me to put Guess what? A resistor and a diode. So I had to learn about a little bit of electrical engineering. Blah. So when you put a resistor on a circuit, it can change the voltage of the output. It can change the ECU's checksum on the presence of other things. Myriad of problems can happen. So what we found was it's better to build like you got to build it and find out if your resistance is low enough that you can just add a resistor and a diode, and we got lucky. So I put 4 diodes in the system, 2 shock keys between the headlights, and 1 in the system before the resistor, if I recall. And that ended up solving that problem. There's no upper radiator support. You guys notice that all cars have an upper radiator support? That's ugly. Yeah, it's gone. Yeah, this car never had one. This car is an open fender race car at heart. If you were to take these off, then the hood off, the car would have exposed wheels on full corners. You take all the safety features off this car and the dirt and the road shit. This car is an open fender cart that weighs around 1,800 pounds. It's radical. So to have a Corvette frame, I think we calculated it at 22% smaller than the C6 Corvette. But by scale, it's very identical. We made some major modifications to the other supports, and we were talking about this today, how we're going to weld and plate that up. It's really hard to see. I'll be doing a special write-up on the interior, which we're doing last. Interiors, it's not too hard. It's tedious. It's something you just take your time, you find out what you like, and you don't quit till it looks like what you think it's got to look like. It's nothing difficult. It's a series of simple processes. It's just repeating them over and over and being very consistent. We had 2 people flock the dashboard, and we both stroked the brush different, and so the flock came out a little different. But overall, the flock dashboard with the rubber mat and the Dynamat and the foam mat ended up being very Porsche. So we like the look. We're going to do the rest of the dashboard in flocked suede. You'll have the suede there, suede here, carbon fiber armrest on the way. Let's see if we have an update on the carbon fiber armrest. Here's this. Sorry to be moving so quickly, guys. We've done a lot of work and haven't done many videos. But so we have the carbon fiber armrest has been restored. It was split in half. I know. You're saying it's not carbon fiber yet. It's ABS. Right. It's ABS with about 100 plastic staples, 2-part epoxy. On top, we ran an acetone ASA slurry to heal it, and we're going to do a second skin in that, and then I'm going to drop epoxy over that. I'm going to do fiber reinforced putty right there, and I'm pretty much going to do like take the epoxy and fiberglass chopped toe and just put it in there, and then we're going to wrap this in some twill. And this is going to be the carbon fiber armrest, because everyone knows the interior's got to be clutch. So, little brief, because if you're just tuning in and haven't seen the last episodes, this is the first time this car's had a window on the passenger side. If you've been paying attention, you noticed these doors weigh like 2 pounds, and they close really easy. But passengers don't feel safe, even though I have like a little small safety wafer. Also, you can't roll up the window, and the other day it was hot, and I wanted to run the air conditioner, and we couldn't. So, also like window tint. I don't like how cheap that sounds versus we have a whole door over there. Now, why would a door be a big deal? Well, the thing is, we put a car that was a foot narrower on a frame that was a foot wider. So at first we had to chop this inner support down, which we're going to reinforce using tube frame, Dom piping, because we're cheap. One day, guys, maybe we'll be able to afford the good chromoly. But right now, we use what we got, which I had to cut out a slot out of the door, and the slot is the exact shape of the support. Then I cut a notch in the support for the motor. Then I welded around the notch to make it stronger. I'm going to weld in a box plate to solve that permanently. We welded this back in, a little 1-inch bar support, but pardon the window rattle because I don't have the felt insert. I used the trimmed down Pontiac Solstice window guard to add tension to the glass. Hear me out. Realigning a 3-piece indoor panel onto the outdoor panel and using 3 different cars to make it work. It closes solid, but the glass gives a little twang because the bottom corner touches, but we have a felt pad to adapt for that. On this side, it's worth noting, we're going to be cutting along this edge, pulling it out 4 inches, and adding kind of a curved taper like we have in the front. From above, the car will have the same curve on the front as it will in the rear. We just have to find a way to make it happen, which we don't know. So that's another challenge. Last week, I'm sure you guys saw, we added 2.5 inches of fender flare. Part of the step to make the car a foot wider on each side. It was like 2 inches, 2.25. I don't remember the numbers, but we're 3D printing the inserts here. But everyone says that the support in there already looks cool enough. So we might just leave it open, but I think if we put a grill behind it, it'll look better. We're going to be putting on fender flares probably this week and then dropping the side skirts last. Front fenders and bumper first. Rear fender exaggerates those body lines that are started. And then between those you connect the dots using the side skirts. If you have a different process, please let me know so maybe I can do this better in the future. But for my thoughts are, a car-like motion starts initially, and you work from the inertia that it launches. You follow the lines through the body, and what they want to throw you exaggerate the further you go from the front. But as above, so below, you must match your angles that start in the front and mirror them with angles in the rear, or else the vehicle will lose balance and look disproportionate or like you Frankensteined it. So that's pretty much all I got wind for today, guys. It's been a really long week of working on the car. I know I haven't done a lot of updates because I've been so busy working on it, but hopefully you can see the difference from what it looked like last week with the different headlight brackets, the hood pins. I relocated them. I made these much more predictable, and the beams got a better angle and projection. And I set it back 6 inches further back than last time. So the lights are deeper in the car. So when the hood's down, it looks more Monte Carlo. As you kind of see the like. So how far the headlights start and stop is really important. I didn't realize that when calculating my angles of the front bumper. So this bumper cover, I call it BC. When the BC in the 3D printer, when the BC was all calculated, I thought the headlights would have been further back because I measured far back, but I forgot the intercooler. And then once we realized we had to have space for the intercooler and then another oil cooler, we needed 8 more inches than we had. And I was going to shorten the car a lot and then chop the top, but I don't think it's even going to be doable because we needed space for the intercooler. And if we don't need to chop that, then we don't need to balance the rear. But I'll tell you guys more about it later. It's been a long night.